U.S. Supreme Court justices have signaled that they are likely to uphold President Donald Trump's travel ban targeting several Muslim-majority countries, one of the most contentious policies of his presidency. Trump has said the travel ban is needed to protect the United States from terrorists. The current travel ban, announced last September, prohibits entry into the United States of most people from Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria and Yemen. U.S. non-proliferation envoy Christopher Ford has said Washington is not seeking to reopen or renegotiate the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, but hopes to stay into it, fix its flaws with a supplementary agreement. U.S. President Donald Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron have pledged to seek stronger measures to contain Iran. However, Trump refrained from committing to stay in a 2015 nuclear deal and threatened Tehran with retaliation if it restarted its nuclear program. French President Emmanuel Macron has called on the United States not to abandon a nuclear agreement with Iran until a broader international accord is reached that addresses all remaining US and European concerns about Iran. Macron also said the current deal was not perfect but must remain in place until a replacement was forged. Trump has often vowed to pull the United States out of the 2015 nuclear pact between Iran and 6 major powers. Thousands of people joined protests in the center of the Armenian capital, Yerevan, that became celebrations after the acting Prime Minister suggested holding new parliamentary elections to defuse the political crisis. The crisis has seen tens of thousands of people take to the streets in anti-government protests in the last 2 weeks and looked to have peaked on Monday when Serge Sargsyan resigned as Prime Minister. Danish inventor Peter Madsen was sentenced to life in prison on Wednesday for murdering, sexually mutilating and dismembering a Swedish female journalist with premeditation aboard his home-made submarine in Copenhagen harbour in 2017. Madsen sat motionless as the Copenhagen City Court handed down its verdict in a grisly case straight from the pages of a dark Scandinavian psycho thriller. There has been a steep drop in U.S. travellers to Cuba after tightening of travel restrictions by President Donald Trump. The number of Americans travelling to Cuba surged after former U.S. President Barack Obama reached a landmark deal with then Cuban President Raul Castro in 2014 and eased travel restrictions while maintaining a ban on tourism. Iraq's Shiites, who fought collectively against former dictator Saddam Hussein, have become deeply fragmented and disillusioned with their leaders after 15 years in power. The divisions within the community now risk splitting the Shiite vote in May 12 election, which could complicate and delay the formation of a government and threaten gains against the terror group Islamic State. Pakistan High Commissioner to India Sohail Mahmood said a formal visit to the holiest shrine of Sikhism, the Golden Temple in northern state of Punjab. Mahmood paid obeisance and penned down his experience in the visitor's book. Golden Temple, also known as Sri Harmandir Sahib, is a revered spiritual site of Sikhism and is thronged by close to 100,000 devotees on a daily basis. Tibetan community in India's northern hill town of Dharamshala has celebrated the 29th birthday of the second most powerful figure in Tibetan Buddhism, Panchen Lama, who disappeared 20 years ago at the age of 6. Yedun Nyama, who was appointed the 11th Panchen Lama by the 14th Dalai Lama, disappeared in 1995. Tibetan activists say he has been kept at a secret location by the Chinese government ever since. More than 900 creative high-tech enterprises from China are taking the spotlight at the ongoing Hannover Trade Fair in Germany. China is an important partner of Germany's Industry 4.0 program, which was first proposed at the 2011 Hannover Messe. Chinese companies brought their latest technologies and research and development achievements to the exhibition, winning praise from other attendees. China is considering the establishment of a financial court in Shanghai to deal with finance-related commercial and administrative cases in the city. According to Chinese officials, the court would help bolster the international influence of China's financial justice, forestall financial risks, steer the financial sector to serve the real economy, and build Shanghai into an international financial center by 2020. French President Emmanuel Macron has urged the United States to reject narrow nationalism and engage the world, telling US lawmakers that modern economic and security challenges must be a shared responsibility. Capping a 3-day visit to the United States, Macron told a joint meeting of Congress that international engagement was the only solution. Two teenagers were killed in flash floods in Israel and the Palestinian territories on Wednesday as a rare April storm swept through the Holy Land. A teenage boy was reportedly carried away in flash floods in a southern Israeli desert. A video showed men carrying the teen into a military helicopter that evacuated him to hospital. He was pronounced dead aboard the helicopter before reaching the hospital. Greek and Macedonian foreign ministers have met with the UN envoy Matthew Nimitz in Vienna for a new round of talks aiming to resolve a decades-old row over the name Macedonia. Sources said the talks were cordial, but there was no breakthrough. The dispute between Greece and its northern neighbour broke out when Macedonia emerged as an independent country in 1991 from the disintegration former Yugoslavia. Workers at Greece's dominant power utility Public Power Corporation took to the streets urging lawmakers to rescind the planned sale of power stations. Workers gathered outside Parliament as lawmakers debated legislation inside which paves the way for PPC to begin selling plants in May. Some of the protesters emptied sacks of coal outside Parliament. International donors have raised $4.4 billion in emergency aid for Syria and its neighbours, well short of the UN target for 2018. The United States failed to pledge any money, while the United Nations said more money may still come in. The US government is reviewing its Syria policy, including its humanitarian support. US President Trump has questioned the value of such and as he pursues his America First agenda. The European Union will extend its arms embargo on Myanmar for another year this week and may then move to target more Myanmar generals with fresh sanctions. The EU has accused Myanmar of serious and systemic human rights violations in a military operation in the country's northwest last year that has sent nearly 700,000 Rohingya Muslims fleeing to neighbouring Bangladesh. Ukrainian military pilot Mykola Volkozov could barely move under the weight of a lead vest meant to protect him from radiation as he prepared for his first flight over the Chernobyl reactor after the world's worst nuclear disaster in 1986. Remembering the incident still brings tears to Volkozov's eyes after he survived the risk of radiation poisoning to live to a ripe age of 86. Hundreds took to the streets after Mexican authorities said 3 missing Mexican students were killed last month in the western state of Jalisco and their bodies dissolved in acid after criminals confused them with members of a rival gang. Organizers of the student-led demonstration in the capital of Jalisco state said the government needed to do more to address disappearances and killings, especially of young people. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has toured the Berlin Air Show, accompanied by the French Economy Secretary. The air show is partnered with France this year. Germany and France have also agreed on the central requirements for a new fighter jet to replace Eurofighters Typhoon and Rafale warplanes beginning in 2040. A Pennsylvania jury of 7 men and 5 women is beginning its deliberations to decide whether to convict comedian and actor Bill Cosby of sexual assault, attempting to reach a verdict where a previous jury was hopelessly deadlocked. In his first trial last year, 12 different jurors deliberated 5.5 days but remained deadlocked. The judge declared a mistrial and prosecutors decided to try him again.
Yesterday, questioning an accuser is not shaming a victim.
A judge in Myanmar will rule next week on whether a police captain was credible when he testified that 2 Reuters journalists were framed. A court in Yangon has been holding hearings since January to decide whether the Reuters journalists will be charged under Official Secrets Act. The case relates a probe into the killing of 10 Rohingya Muslim men and boys in Rakhine State. China has welcomed the expected visit by the U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. U.S. President Donald Trump said Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer will travel to China in a few days for trade talks. The regional head of the Madrid has resigned after claims she had falsified her master's degree and been caught shoplifting in 2011. A CCTV video published by a newspaper showed Sifuns emptying her handbag for a security guard in a local supermarket after being accused of taking anti-aging cream. Hundreds of Nicaraguans held candles and marched into the night to demand justice for the 27 people killed after police cracked down on recent demonstrations and to call for the resignation of President Daniel Ortega. The protesters, mostly students, set out from Central American University where the violent confrontations first began. Britain's Prince Harry joined the High Commissioners to Britain of Australia and New Zealand at the Cenotaph in London to commemorate Anzac Day. Prince Harry and his fiancée Meghan Markle paid tribute to Australian and New Zealand servicemen and women at a dawn service. Prince Harry laid a wreath to honour the fallen at Hyde Park Corner in London. Tourists began leaving Boracay Island a day before the Philippine government closes the holiday hotspot for a 6-month cleanup. The government will close the tourist destination on April 26th to rehabilitate its beaches and remove structures built on top of wetlands and forests. Bolivian President Evo Morales has met with Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel just days after Diaz-Canel became Cuba's first non-Castro president in almost 60 years. The visit comes on the heels of a visit by Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, who was the first foreign leader to meet Diaz-Canel since he became president. Spanish police and customs officials have announced a record cocaine seizure detailing an operation that discovered nearly 9 tons of the drug hidden among boxes of bananas in a shipping container at the southern port. The container was imported by a Colombian company on a ship coming from the Colombian port of Turbo. Over 2,000 South African Union members marched in Johannesburg in a nationwide protest against a proposed national minimum wage, presenting a test for new President Cyril Ramaphosa, who champions the policy. The over $1 an hour minimum wage was approved by the cabinet in November last year and meant to be introduced on May 1st. But dissatisfaction over the minimum wage bill could delay implementation. Activists of animal rights organisation People for the Ethical Treatments of Animals held a protest in New Delhi over exploitation of horses for drug production. The activists were seen holding silent protest with placards in their hands as they stood in front of a dummy of a horse lying on the ground. Every year, thousands of horses are injected with toxins in order to make drugs. It's over to news from India. India's controversial self-styled godman Asaram was sentenced to life in prison till death on Wednesday for raping a teenager in 2013. His legal team said it will appeal in a higher court and file a bail plea today. The 77-year-old Asaram has been lodged in Jodhpur Central Jail ever since his arrest. Asaram was arrested in Indore and brought to Jodhpur in 2013. India's third biggest software services exporter Wipro Limited forecast weak growth in revenue during the current quarter after two clients went bankrupt and it lost business in the US Bengaluru headquarters. Wipro has said it expected revenue from its key IT services business to be in a range of $2.2 billion to $2.7 billion in its fiscal first quarter to end June, as it reported a bigger than expected fall in fourth quarter net profit. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has reviewed the reconstruction work at Kedarpuri town, which encompassed the holy Kedarnath shrine, and expressed satisfaction at the progress work. It is for the second time in the last few months that PM Modi has monitored the progress of the reconstruction projects via video conferencing and drone cameras at the township around the centuries-old Himalayan shrine. PM Modi laid the foundation stones of the project late last year. Let's take you through stories from the world of sport. In Europa League action, two-time winners Atletico Madrid travel to the Emirates to take on Arsenal in the semi-final first leg. The Gunners are the top-scoring side in the competition with 29 goals so far, while Atletico, who dropped down from the Champions League, have already netted 15 times in the 6 knockout matches played so far. This will be the first competitive meeting between the two sides. Second Europa League semi-final on the night sees Marseille and Red Bull Salzburg go head-to-head for the third time this season. Both teams were pitted together during the group stages of the competition, where Salzburg emerged as group winners with an unbeaten run. The Austrian side overturned a 4-2 deficit in the previous round with a 4-1 second leg win and progressing at the expense of Lazio.